President Trump's speech at the General Assembly at the United Nations started off a little bit rocky. Teleprompter issues.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Donald Trump, President of the United States of America. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble.
President Trump picked a fight with the UN this morning, telling other United Nations members that their countries were going to hell.
Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained. What makes the world so beautiful is that each country is unique. But to stay this way, every sovereign nation must have the right to control their own borders. You have the right to control your borders, as we do now, and to limit the sheer numbers of migrants entering their countries and paid for by the people of that nation that were there and that built that particular nation at the time. They put their blood, sweat, tears, money into that country, and now they're being ruined. Proud nations must be allowed to protect their communities and prevent their societies from being overwhelmed by people they have never seen before, with different customs, religions, with different everything. Where migrants have violated laws, lodged false asylum claims, or claimed refugee status for illegitimate reasons, they should, in many cases, be immediately sent home. And while we will always have a big heart for places and people that are struggling and truly compassionate, answers will be given. We have to solve the problem, and we have to solve it in their countries, not create new problems in our countries. And we are very helpful to a lot of countries that are just not able to send their people anymore. They used to send them to us in caravans of 25,000, 30,000 people each. These massive caravans of people pouring into our country, totally unchecked and unvetted. But not anymore. According to the Council of Europe, in 2024, almost 50% of inmates in German prisons were foreign nationals or migrants. In Austria, the number was 53% of the people in prisons were from places that weren't from where they are now. In Greece, the number was 54%, and in Switzerland, beautiful Switzerland, 72% of the people in prisons are from outside of Switzerland. When your prisons are filled with so-called asylum seekers who repaid kindness, and that's what they did, they repaid kindness with crime, it's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you, I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. In America, we've taken bold action to swiftly shut down uncontrolled migration. Once we started detaining and deporting everyone who crossed the border and removing illegal aliens from the United States, they simply stopped coming. They're not coming anymore. We're getting a lot of credit, but they're not coming anymore.
Trump's speech to the UN's General Assembly was filled with grievances. He took direct shots at the UN, questioning why it exists.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. and then a teleprompter that didn't work.
Trump is referring to several technical glitches that have happened during the visit today. For example, the escalator stopped working when he and First Lady Melania Trump first walked onto it. And Trump's teleprompter didn't work when he started his speech.
The United Nations says glitches highlighted by President Trump during his speech yesterday to the General Assembly in New York were caused by his own staff. Trump had blamed the UN for an escalator that stopped working just as the president and first lady were about to step on. That sparked several prominent right-wing supporters of the president to post conspiracies online. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt linked to an article posted prior to the event that claimed UN staff members had joked about shutting the escalators off to force Trump to walk up the stairs. But after an investigation, a UN spokesperson said a videographer with the U.S. delegation triggered a safety mechanism that caused the escalator to stop. The president also blamed the UN for teleprompters that were not working properly at the beginning of his speech, but the UN investigation found that it was a White House staffer who was responsible for operating the teleprompter. It is true that elevators and escalators at the UN in New York and Geneva have been turned off at times in recent months, but that's in order to save money in the midst of a liquidity crisis due in part to funding cuts from the Trump administration.
On the substance, obviously, President Trump talked about some of the international crises facing the global communities. In part, the conflict in Gaza. He said that that needs to end. There needs to be a ceasefire, although not without the hostages being released.
Unfortunately, Hamas has repeatedly rejected reasonable offers to make peace. We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire.
And he also really chided some of America's allies for calling for a Palestinian state. And on Russia and Ukraine, the president also called out some of the U.S.'s European allies, saying that the U.S. is ready to move forward on sanctions punishing countries for buying Russian oil and gas, but that there are still European and NATO nations doing that. He says until that stops, the U.S. sanctions will not move forward.
China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war.
The U.S. Secret Service has dismantled a network of devices that officials say could be used to shut down cell service in New York City. Over 300 co-located SIM servers and 100,000 SIM cards were discovered at multiple sites within 35 miles of the United Nations building. The discovery comes as world leaders gathered in the city for a meeting of the UN General Assembly.
You know those spam calls and texts that we get on our phone? Well, think of that, but on a massive scale. Officials say that this system could have blocked cell phone towers and even prevented emergency calls from going through right in the middle of the UN General Assembly. These systems are called SIM farms. Agents say the system was capable of sending out 30 million text messages a minute. That's enough to message the entire country in just 12 minutes. Investigators say they seized more than 300 servers and more than 100,000 SIM cards from 5 sites just within 35 miles from the United Nations.
This was a case that began as a protective intelligence investigation threat case. What they uncovered was a major network of telecommunications devices that can be used anonymously and encrypted. They can be used to shut down cell towers. They could be used to not allow access to EMS and 911. And we do know that nation-state threat actors or foreign governments are communicating with criminals in the United States.
The Secret Service calls this a new threat in cybersecurity, with criminal organizations working together to undermine communications.
Officials say the devices allow for anonymous encrypted communications, and that early analysis points to individuals backed by foreign nations and others known to law enforcement. Investigators say they are combing through every text and call associated with the devices.
The 21st century isn't much different from the past. If a nation wants peace, it still has to work on weapons. It's sick, but that's the reality. Not international law, not cooperation. Weapons decide who survives. Excellencies, you know perfectly well international law doesn't work fully unless you have powerful friends who are truly willing to stand up for it. And even that doesn't work without weapons. It's terrible, but without it, things would be even worse. There are no security guarantees except friends and weapons. Nations can speak about their pain from stages like this, but even during bloodshed, there isn't a single international institution that can truly stop it. That's how weak these institutions have become. Weapons decide who survives. Excellencies, yesterday President Trump stood right here in this hall, and God saved him from a murder attempt during the campaign. A shot was fired from a rifle, and just a fraction of an inch saved his life. Weapons are evolving faster than our ability to defend ourselves. Now there are tens of thousands of people who know how to professionally kill using drones. Stopping that kind of attack is harder than stopping any gun, knife, or bomb. This is what Russia has brought with its war.
What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity that is both documented and monitored. And it will be recorded in history books and the pages of international conscience as one of the most horrific chapters of humanitarian tragedy in the 20th and 21st centuries. Have not been spared the attacks which have damaged the mosques, churches and cemeteries in a blatant violation of the historic status quo and in a clear violation of the provisions of the international law. Despite all what our people have suffered, we reject what Hamas carried out on the 7th of October. These actions that targeted Israeli civilians and took them hostages, because these actions do not represent the Palestinian people, nor do they represent their just struggle for freedom and independence. We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance. Hamas and other factions will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian National Authority as part of a process to build the institutions of a one state, one law, and one legal security forces. We reiterate that we do not want an armed state. The time has come for the international community to do right by the Palestinian people so that they may obtain their legitimate rights to be rid of the occupation and to not remain a hostage to the temperament of Israeli politics, which denies our rights and continue in their injustice, oppression and aggression. We are continuing to move forward, and we will continue our peaceful, legal and diplomatic fight to obtain our rights.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the State of Israel. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Please order in the hall. Please order in the hall. Please order in the hall. Please order in the hall and please be seated. Please order in the hall.
Mr. President, the families of our dear hostages, so far, we've brought home 207 of these hostages, but 48 still remain in the dungeons of Gaza. 20 of them are alive, starved, tortured, deprived of any daylight, deprived of humanity. I want to do something I've never done before. I want to speak from this forum directly to those hostages through loudspeakers. I've surrounded Gaza with massive loudspeakers connected to this microphone in the hope that our dear hostages will hear my message. Our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter and we will not rest until we bring all of you home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried. They're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans. So to the remaining Hamas leaders and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages, all of them, the whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down. Ladies and gentlemen, if Hamas agrees to our demands, the war could end right now. Gaza would be demilitarized, Israel would retain overriding security control, and a peaceful civilian authority would be established by Gazans and others committed to peace with Israel.